attending my very, very first LinkedIn Live, where I'm going to be speaking to leaders and thought leaders across the country about what the next generation of leaders look like. What is it that we need? What are some of the things? And my first guest today wrote the book, The Ask Formula, and she is an amazing thought leader. Let's welcome Carole Stizza. There
hello,
she
hello.
is. So welcome, my friends. I've got your book here. It is amazing. They can get it on Amazon, right?
Oh, yeah.
So tell me a little bit about this. Now, I know it, but for everyone in the audience.
Well, as an executive coach, I find that many leaders get traditionally stuck in being very directive or telling or offering. And when I went to research how to coach, help, and train leaders to give good feedback, I ran into some very interesting research that was going in the wrong direction. Like teaching people to give feedback had the adverse effect of making it good. So what I did is I started researching how could we do it differently. And we found that by teaching people how to ask for what they wanted, when they could use it in a specific way that was easy to keep handy, then they automatically knew what type of feedback to give that was higher in quality, higher in directness, and higher in effectiveness. So I called it the Ask Framework because that's what it is. It's a framework. There's no right or wrong way to do it as long as you include all the parts, and it will teach you how to go after and get what you need.
That is so great. And I know I've read the book. I love it. And it's quite frankly, sometimes we're taught not to ask, to let our results speak for ourselves, right? And we know that this generation is starving for knowledge and wanting to learn and become great leaders about bringing their whole self into work. What do you see in your communications? What are you seeing right now that is the next generation leader, that those high potential, those emerging leaders?
I think it runs probably very parallel to what you offer in your book, is knowing that hard skills and soft skills aren't an either or situation. It is a both and situation. And what I find is there's two types of minds. The young minds kind of want things to be dumped into their brain to level up on their expertise. We call it horizontal learning. And then at some point, especially when they have to take care of people, they need that learning to grow vertically, like expand their thinking. So your approach to both sides of the record, so to speak, both sides of thinking, the hard skills and the soft skills become this beautiful dance that takes some interesting new steps in acclimating to in order to effectively offer.
I graciously thank you for bringing that up because, for me, when people were talking to me about, what is your secret sauce? What are you doing? I didn't realize that I was a leader that was more emotional based and less resume based. But I have learned I had to increase my resume base to balance that out, to be an effective leader. And I think it is a both and approach. You can't be all emotional based and you can't be all resume based because those traits like frank and diplomatic are very, very different. And if you're one or the other, they both have kind of a bad effectiveness on the end result, wouldn't you say?
It can. So when you bring forth the both and thinking, and we've been raised in an either or mindset, we forget that both both spectrums are required, and it's up to the individual to dance in between them and see which one's most effective at any one situation. And I think that's what kind of a new nuance to
Yeah.
what you're offering, is that the emerging leaders and emerging executives today have heard so much bantering about be authentic, be transparent, to a point where they question where the lines and boundaries should really be.
Hmm.
And boundaries are required to maintain a sense of control in your own life, control of what information is most helpful, control in when is directiveness helpful to somebody's learning and when is empowering really effective. And it is truly a new dance
Yeah.
that hasn't been talked about enough in that framework, I don't think.
And it's not just empathy
Mhm.
and authenticity and transparency. Those are kind of the top portions of it. But for me, like with you, the drummer, and not you're not the drummer, I won't say that. You have some of that, but with your book, the Ask framework, the drummer side B is curiosity.
Mhm.
And how to, using that kind of framework and understanding the power of questions can
Mhm.
really make a difference in an employee's life and your own as you
Right.
come to work, bringing your whole self now. And it's so interesting because that's what we're craving is we spend 8 to 10 hours a day at work. We need to start bringing our own self and balance it.
Mhm.
You can have accountability with kindness. It just is at what stage are we looking at that?
Right. One of the interesting tools available to leaders and those people who work are assessments. And you offer a great assessment, and there is a brilliant bouquet of assessments out there. And one of the assessments that I've become more familiar with recently is an assessment of polarities, key polarity indexes, meaning where are these polar opposites for you, and where do you tend to lean, and where do we need to balance it out. But among that assessment is capturing of your energy, of how you're like in your pajamas, like just you,
Right.
versus how you are at work. And we're looking for minimal energy changes so that we can start to see that who you are in your pajamas is actually who's showing up at work, not in your pajamas.
Right.
That there's not a lot of energy having to be expended to be different
Hmm.
because you think you need to be. It's how do we align relax you with work you. And that gives us a different conversation into how big of a leap is it for them to use side A and side B
Hmm.
simultaneously. And we're talking about polar opposites such as being directive or empowering. It's not an either or. You need both
You need both.
to take care of yourself or take care of others.
Hmm.
Obviously, you need both. And there's quite a few standard polarities that show up in our lives and at work, that if we can start to see where your preferences is, how far to one side of that polarity are you then to the other, then we can start to unpack where you're inadvertently causing friction. So like
Right.
you had mentioned in your book, if everybody was just side A and not any soft skills on side B, there's a lot of directiveness going on and not a lot of empowering.
Right. And that's the thing with helping and enforcing. The
Mm.
same, it's paradoxical. And, two things that appear to be different are actually very similar. And, if you're going to be a leader who is 100% enforcing
Mm.
compared to a leader who is 100% helping, they both have their own sets of problems. So if you can
Mhm.
balance that and understand that there are times that, you've got your own work to do. And if somebody has come into you 3 or 4 times asking the same question, it's now time to say, hey, listen, you need to write this down and go try it and come back. A little bit more enforcing rather than the past 2 or 3 times that you've helped them.
Right.
Right.
Yes. And so it's interesting because you presented two things that need to coexist to be successful. You need to understand where empowering and helping, or empowering and teaching, or empowering and being directive. I mean, there's a word salad out there we could pick, but we really are looking at concepts of what feel like opposites. So when people try and make them either or is when we have a lot of problems. It's not black or white.
We've got to make them a both and. And
Right.
taking that both and approach is what I feel that these emerging leaders, these high potential leaders that are coming into that next step need to understand how to balance. And without really understanding who they are intentionally, by taking some of these assessments, we work with I work with the side B assessment and the Harrison. But if we do that and intentionally look at where they are, then it becomes an actual session and an actual intention to grow where you need to grow, rather than guessing, well, I could be this. I could be more pragmatic. I could be this. Now we've got a roadmap.
I think you bring up a good point, and I want people to hear clearly that first, all of assessments have an agenda. They all have a point. There's no panacea, no one assessment that's going to be a panacea. But assessments are really simply to increase self-awareness. When people hear the word assessment, they're often associating with a test, right or wrong. Assessments are never designed to change who you are.
No.
Everybody is unique, brilliantly talented, and we can scientifically show the data on how everybody thinks differently. We want you to step into what makes you unique and elevate that and let go of who you're not.
Yeah.
But within that realm of being uniquely you, increasing your self-awareness to know where your frustrations show up or where you may inadvertently cause frustration is just a better way of knowing where you're great and where you're not, and letting go of where you're not and claiming where you are great.
Right.
And I want people to know that when we talk about side A and side B, we're not asking you to change. We're asking you to elevate where you're already great. We just need to put them in the right balance.
Exactly. Great point. And to your point on the term assessment, I think in most of the things that I use, I say survey, because it really is a survey of your preferences and your tasks and your intentions and your interests, and if you can really tap into that, then bringing your whole self to work should be easy. Right?
Yeah.
So one thing from your book and the Ask framework, what is one thing that you would, for new leaders, want them to know?
That curiosity can diffuse most situations of conflict.
Mm-hmm.
I think leaders get caught up thinking they have to have the answer. They have to be able to solve. They have to be able to calm chaos. And the only way to do that effectively is to first get curious and ask what's going on the other side of the desk. What's going on is contextually, and just curiosity is a brilliant tool that was kind of been drilled out of us in school.
Yeah.
Therefore, we are not practiced at asking. We look at asking as a weakness. And I said, asking can be your biggest strength if you know how to ask well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would offer curiosity. If there was one thing to offer, it'd be curiosity.
And that's the drummer. right? Their side B is curiosity, and always looking for, with complementing their side A as a visionary, a forward thinker. Because if you're asking a lot of questions, we're on the pathway of development. We're on the pathway of innovation. And if you can do that, then, stepping into that, if that is your strength, there's so many things we can do. And I think your framework is one of those things that will help elevate that in a person who is genuinely, or honestly curious.
And the people I run into that don't claim to be naturally curious,
Mm-hmm.
We as humans are naturally curious, but only about things that we find important. So when they say, I'm not curious, I said, yes, you are. You're just not curious about this.
Yeah.
Right. Curious about this. And sometimes it's just reshaping their perspective and what they get out of it, depending on what the situation is. For example, if they're having an employee on their team that's exhibiting some toxic behaviors, they immediately want to fire or put into some type of remediation or punitive situation. And I always go, well, what are you curious about the most with them? And they're like, why are they doing it? I'm like, no, past that. What are you really curious about?
Yeah.
And they end up saying, I want to know what they think they're getting out of it. I said, that's a great question. That's where sitting down and laying out the facts, letting them know the effect of the stories that people are coming to conclusions about those actions, and then asking, what's the one thing you think you're going to get out of these behaviors?
Right.
And seeing where their head is, because that's the door where conversation is going to be the most meaningful. And when a leader comes back and tells me, I did what you said, and I learned things I never knew before, and now we're on a different conversation of how to right the ship. I was fascinated by this handicap that we have about asking and knowing how to ask and knowing how to use our curiosity in the most effective way. And I was really disappointed to find that it wasn't a pillar in current leadership genre when people are being taught MBAs and in leadership schools. It's part of the conversation outside of academia. It's just not part of the inside. And
Right.
so that's where I think books like ours have the most relevant application.
Yeah. To actually playing the other side of the record so that you can really grow with self-development, self-awareness, but you're doing that for the people you serve. Because once you understand how to tap into some of these emotional based skills, you start growing, and you find out much more, like you said, than you ever thought you could. And rather than losing who was once a great employee, you now retained and probably added more loyalty and more drive by asking those questions.
Yeah, I mean, it's a brilliant place to be when you have good talent and you have this opportunity to understand what it would take to retain them.
Yeah.
But I'm still surprised at how many people don't know. When I say, tell me about your best team member, and they go, oh, accolades. And I go, what is the number one thing that keeps them there? And they're like, I don't, the work? I go, have you ever asked? No. Maybe it's time.
Maybe
In
it's
this
time.
new setting that we're stepping into, where the Great Resignation,
Yeah.
odd name, is really pulling a punch, I get to talk to people how to retain the talent they want. The talent you don't want has a tendency to stay anyway. So why don't you keep the talent you want? And so it's a good time to sit down and have a heart to heart with people. Like, what is the number one reason you're here?
Yeah.
What is the number one thing I need to always create for you to keep you here? Often it's being seen, valued, and heard.
Hmm.
Another one is knowing where they get to grow to in a company. If there is no place to grow to, how do they get to grow in their influence? Where are they going to grow to? If they have no place to grow, they will pick another garden.
To grow, exactly.
Yeah. And so
Where their roots can spread. Absolutely.
even in
Um,
small companies,
mhm.
adding challenges to their workload and keeping their expertise growing is growth. You don't have to have a
Is growth.
title to go to.
Right. For me, you know how I feel. A leader is not necessarily about a title because
Mhm.
the corner office, leadership, titles, all of that really is only for a flow chart, right?
Mhm.
And but it's good. I mean, that's your both and. You have to have it, but you also have to have those other skills that leaders have. And, I've had many leaders, as you know, and you've had many leaders and have talked to different types of leaders. And there are some that are so focused on Excel spreadsheets and data that the point I want to get across today, and besides being curious, is that sometimes for 3 minutes in the morning or an afternoon, we need to ditch the data, put on a song, and get back to who we are.
Songs are no different than data.
Right.
If somebody loves data, list your favorite songs. It's a that's what a playlist
Yeah.
is your data. It's and I think it's we forget. I think that when people fall into their comfort zones that exclude other aspects that would make their life as rich as they say they want, you almost have to meet them where they are. And
Yeah.
for the Excel people, I said, well, where's your playlist? And just ask them where that is, because we all forget, we all get into slumps, we all get into habits, and we forget to reevaluate which habits are still working.
Hmm.
And not having a playlist for work, for success, for your plan,
Hmm.
it's just a habit we take for granted on the outside of work and we forget to include it in work. And it can be really effective at work, which is why your book is so revelational.
Thank you. So that reminds me of two things is that, your playlist can be the 5 things that you want to accomplish
Mhm.
in your job. But it also allows you, and that's one reason I love Spotify, is think of it this way. You do the 5 things you want to accomplish, but you also get to ditch some of the things that are tying you up. Unless it's tied to your actual job, then it has to become second nature. But you continue to build upon your playlist and then using it not metaphorically but in action. I always advise people to put 5 songs in as they're driving into work or coming into their office now, and just listen to your motivational, something that's going to pump you up to get your day started playlist about work, to set you into that intentional feeling of curiosity or any of the other side B behaviors. They all have different songs that can motivate you.
Mhm. Um, to tie your playlist idea to an assessment I was using this morning, and I have to put this into practice because I now I'm really, really curious. I was doing a small team on their Clifton strengths.
Yeah.
This is the very first time that they'd actually seen these type of self-awareness opportunities to see their talents on paper and then to describe what those talents do for them. And I would like to challenge them to put a song to each talent, how it shows up for them. Because when you're trying to get people to fall in love with what makes them unique in a world of conformity, it's like taking them to the gym for the first time and asking them to flex a muscle they didn't know they had.
Right.
And so in order to bridge that, or I guess to take a leap, create a
Right.
bridge, putting a song to remind them what that strength does for them would be a really fun way to put into application, reminding themselves what makes them unique.
Over and over and over again, because what's going to happen is once they attach that song to that strength, every time they hear that song, that strength comes up.
Right. And I think all of us, we are very acutely aware with the things we don't like about ourselves.
Yes.
Because in our mind is continually scanning for just two things all the time: where to be accepted and respected and loved, and where to grow next.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we are always, if we overcompensate in where to grow, like improvement, we forget to balance it out where we already are loved, accepted, and respected. And if you're scanning all the time for that and you concentrate on one side more than the other, that's recipe for just getting down on yourself.
Yeah.
And I think music has that, as we've seen in lots of research, music has the ability to bridge multiple aspects of your thinking, as
Yep.
well as an international language. So it's really a great tool.
It is. And we are coming up on the bottom of the hour here. So, first of all, I want to thank you. And I would love everyone who's watching this, either now or in the future, please put a strength that you have and a song that goes with it in the comments. That would be a lot of fun. Thank you, Carole. It has been my honor to have you as my first guest on Don't Stop Us Now. Don't stop
Right.
us now. We're gonna get these side B and our whole selves into the workforce. I'm on a mission and you're there with me.
I love it.
Thank you, my friend.
Anytime.